Namaskar Mitra. Welcome back to the second part of Introduction to Communication Skills. Earlier we had discussed definitions of communication, what is general communication, what is the purpose of communication, what is the scope of communication, what does communication do in general, what are the functions of communication, and then we move towards the concept of non-verbal communication skills. And now let us move forward with that topic by looking into various concerns with regard to non-verbal communication skills, which are the facets of communication skills in general with regard to the non-verbal aspect of it. Looking at the slides that you have in front of you, these are two basic features of the function of communication, that is non-verbal communication. First is static, another is dynamic. Now, what does static consist of? As you can see it on your screen, the first thing is distance, second, orientation, third, your posture, fourth, physical contact. Now, what does this mean? That means these are the areas which remain static once you start communicating. They don't change as much. Moving towards the other aspect, that is the dynamic state of it. What is the first thing? Your facial expressions. It naturally creates an impact when you speak. Your gestures, body gestures and facial gestures. You're looking at a certain thing, your eye contact. For example, if I am looking straight into your eyes, that shows my confidence. If I am not able to meet your eye, that means I am not confident of speaking, or maybe I am lying, or maybe I am not comfortable speaking to you. But if I am looking straight into your eye, that means I am confident and comfortable both in my approach towards what I wish to say. Moving forward with it, understanding of your coming from that particular place, your physique becomes very important, friends. If you are physically fit, it makes you feel confident and it makes your personality that much more pleasing. If you are not physically fit, either you are too thin or too fat, or that adds to what you are conveying. If you are too fat, that adds to the fact that you are lazy. Okay, so that is what you communicate indirectly through your physique. Okay, so your clothes that you wear becomes very important. How you present yourself becomes very important. So that is the part of the physical appearance of the non-verbal communication. Moving towards the second point there in the clockwise direction, that is kinesics. Kinesics is a technical word for gestures, your posture, your body movement. That is known as kinesics. Moving to the third point is your spatial behavior. Okay, so what is your orientation? What is your proximity towards people? What is the distance that you maintain when you talk to people? What is the position that you are standing in? How you communicate, where you are standing from, how you deal with people, what kind of distance is there, that becomes very important. Then your facial expressions, okay, especially in terms of this digitization, okay, or in this very testing times of coronavirus epidemic that we are going through, almost a pandemic now. Okay, so here when you are communicating with your students through online mode, what is the only thing that is visible to them? That is this part, that is your face. Okay, and that becomes very important. So the shape of your face, your skin, your eye shape, your eyebrow position. So this part becomes very important, especially in terms of uh, when you are dealing with people online through various platforms. Okay, you cannot see my entire body there, you can only have a look at my face. So the movement of my eyes and the movement of my face, and the brow, my entire forehead, how I smile, how I speak, that is the only way in which I am able to communicate in an online mode. So that becomes very important. Moving forward, the next point is paralanguage. This is very important. Okay, that means what is the pitch of my tone, how loud am I speaking, okay, what is the timing of what I'm speaking. That becomes very, very important. Moving towards the paradigmatic part of this paralanguage. So what is that? What is the voice quality? Voice quality creates an impact, immeasurable impact. Imagine you listening to Amitabh Bachchan, okay, or Nasiruddin Shah for that matter. The impact that they create with their voice adds to the entire thing that is communicated. Okay, if the person has a very good voice quality, that is an added advantage. So that is a very important part of paralanguage. Moving forward with our slide, then the pitch in which you speak becomes very important. The loudness of your voice also becomes very important. Moving to oculesics. Friends, this is very important as well. Okay, oculesics is related to your eyes. Okay, the eye movement and contact, your visual orientation. Okay, if I'm gazing at a particular thing, if I'm staring at a particular thing, the duration of my gaze, the duration of my stare. For example, I am visiting a museum. Okay, say for instance, I am visiting the Museum of Louvre in Paris. Okay, now there is this very famous painting of Mona Lisa. If I go there and I stand and I actually am standing and looking at that particular picture for a very long time, that means what? That conveys that that particular painting is very important. Okay, if I am looking at that particular painting for a longer period of time, that means I'm analyzing that painting, I'm looking at that from various perspectives. So that is oculesics, how you communicate with eyes. Moving forward is the environmental details of everything. Okay, that is the physical setting where you are. Okay, the artifacts of what you are doing at a particular place. Where am I communicating? Which is the place where I am communicating? What is the zone where I am communicating? That adds to the meaning of it. Say for instance, as I am a teacher of literature, I have to teach a poetry to my students, and that poetry is about nature. Okay, so instead of sitting in the classroom and talking about nature, I should try to take them to a very beautiful scenic place, make them sit there, make them feel the environment, and then talk about the poetry. That would be more impactful. That is the importance of environment. Okay, if I have to teach something in the classroom and that classroom is not in a good condition, that would add to me not being able to understand the entire area, and therefore I would be disturbed by the surrounding of that particular room. And if I am disturbed, my students, my learners would also be equally disturbed. Moving forward to the next point is chronemics. Friends, this is very important, as I also discussed this earlier. Chronos is time. Timing is the most important thing. Okay, you have to be very particular, you have to be very punctual about everything that you do. Believe me, it would create an impact in the minds of the people whom you are related with. If you are on time, if you are very particular about what you do, if you know what exactly needs to be done when, you will earn a lot of respect from people. And this is, my friends, one of the basic problems that we face nowadays. That is, we don't respect time. As it is said, if you don't respect time, time would not respect you. Okay, so be very particular. If you promise someone to meet that person at that particular time, be sure or make sure that you are there for them. Okay, because that would add on to your entire personality. The person who is with you or who is coming to see you somewhere would know that this person is never late, and that indirectly suggests that this person is very particular, is very systematic about how that person goes about everything that he or she does in the life. Moving forward to the next point is olfactics. Okay, now what is that? Olfactics is the sense of smell or the body odor that you carry with you. Okay, very important again. Okay, if you are going to a particular place, if you are going for a wedding, for example, you should smell correct as well. Okay, if you are wearing clean clothes, proper clothes, you should be presentable, physically all right, but the sense of smell also becomes very important. If you are passing on from a place where there is a lot of garbage around, there is a lot of pollution around you, you don't enjoy that place, or you start disliking that place. That place might have the best of the buildings, for example, but you would not enjoy that place because that place is not good enough. Similarly, if you are meeting a person or if you are going to meet somebody, make sure that you smell proper, that you smell good, that you smell clean. Then there is haptics. Haptics is also very important. Okay, that is how you contact or how you come in contact with people. That is the physical contact. Okay, so haptics is also a very important part of communication. Moving forward to the advantages of body language. We have discussed at length about what is non-verbal communication. Now let us move towards the advantages of it. What is the first advantage? You can see it on your screen here. Body language is the most easily visible aspect of communication. It therefore helps the receiver of the message in decoding. As we discussed earlier, the encoding decoding process. So the decoding becomes easier if your body language is proper. Second point is body language complements verbal communication. It helps in establishing rapport. Okay, so when your body language is positive, the other person who is talking to you is also equally positive. If you are negative, if your shoulders are down and you are tired of something, then that would impact in the conversation that you make also, and that would impact in the personality of other person also. The third point is body language adds intensity to the process of communication. Without it, the overall communication will look bland or insipid. Without body language, imagine communication without physical presence. As we had this for the entire year, the last year, we were online and most of us were without camera use and etc. etc. There was a lot of problem in making understand people what you are exactly trying to say, because you cannot show them anything. Next is, because people care for body language, it goes a long way to improve the overall atmosphere and look of the organization. Resourceful manager can make very effective use of it. Body language therefore becomes a very important part. If the body language of the person, for example, is very positive, okay, if you are sitting in a meeting, say for instance, and the person who is going to speak or the speaker is full of life and full of energy and very positive, it rubs on to you. It is very contagious. Body language is very contagious. Okay, if your body language is not good, if your shoulders are down, if you are nervous, if you're disappointed, if you're tired, if you're lazy, kind of, okay, it would impact the audience as well. So when you're going to speak, make sure that your body language is proper, full of positivity, and which should, involve a lot of confidence from your side. So the audience that is going to listen to you is also equally interested in what you are trying to say. Next is the limitations of it. Those were the advantages. Now, what are the limitations? The first point here, since it is non-verbal communication based on facial expressions, it cannot be wholly relied on. See, it is important, but if you only communicate non-verbally, it would not work. It has to be with verbal communication. Words written or spoken can be taken seriously, but body language cannot always be taken seriously. What you speak is taken seriously, but your body language might actually show or mean something different to somebody else. Then, facial expressions, postures, or gestures become ineffective if the listener is inattentive. It therefore requires extra care in getting the right message. Okay? If your expressions are ineffective, then non-verbal communication falls flat. So that should be taken into very important aspect of your communication skills. That is very important. Then people belonging to different cultural backgrounds send out different body language signals. They are therefore liable to be misinterpreted. One has to be very careful in their use and understanding. As we discussed earlier, cultural change or cross-cultural communication now is very important. Okay, if you don't understand others' culture, then you fail to realize what is good in their culture with regard to body language, what is bad in their culture with regard to body language as well. And then use of body language is not very effective in large gatherings. In public communication, it is not effective because people can hardly see you from a long distance. Nowadays, with a lot of technological advancement, there are big screens wherein you can see the exact posture or the gestures of speakers. But earlier, if there is no aid of technology, it was very difficult to convey your message through body language. So it was mostly vocal or through your tone or through your intonation. It is effective in face-to-face situation. That means there are just two or a small number of participants in the communication situation. If the participants who are a part of communication are minimum, then body language is more impactful. Moving forward, non-verbal communication is not only crucial in daily communication situation, but also for the interpreter. Okay, it is actively a part of what you say, what you convey to people, because it has to be with communication that is verbal. Then non-verbal communication can take various forms, each of which illustrated or replaces a certain part of verbal communication. Third point, it includes many more elements than one might think at first. See, non-verbal communication is not only about your gestures and posture. It is much more, as we discussed earlier as well. How you speak, what you speak, how you convey, what you convey, the importance of pause and the importance of dynamics in non-verbal communication, which are beyond gestures and postures. As we discussed, there is the chronemic side to communication as well. There is a haptic side to communication as well. Then, when interpreters are in a working situation where the audience will not see them, non-verbal communication can represent a problem. Say for instance, you cannot see me, then the non-verbal aspect of communication would naturally fall flat, because then your non-verbal communication would entirely depend on two things. That is your tonal quality and your intonation, and how you speak, what you speak, because people are not able to see you visually. So then most of the parts of non-verbal communication would fail and would fall flat, and the audience might even be tempted to believe that the interpreters have not done a good job. If non-verbal communication is not good, let me tell you friends, your communication would stand unsuccessful most of the times. Moving forward, in order to be able to work properly, interpreters need to make sense of non-verbal cues. You send cues when you speak to people through your sign, through your gesture, through your posture, through your body language. So those cues are to be taken up properly by the audience if they have to understand what you are trying to say. This is only possible because a special part of our brain deals with the emotional part of the message. Okay, emotions in the message are also very important. Say for instance, I am going on speaking in a monotonous manner without putting in expressions which are in terms of the tone that I use, the particular statement that I wish to make, the way in which I speak what I speak, then the message would fall flat. Not only intelligence but also emotional intelligence is decided upon for interpreting non-verbal elements. Okay, not only what I say, but how I say becomes very important. Whether non-verbal communication supports the interpreters in their task or presents a difficulty, it will always play an important role. That is why it is important, because you are most of the times interpreted by your non-verbal way of speaking rather than your verbal way of speaking. Okay, moving forward, now you can see on your screen friends, there are certain signs. These are gestures. Okay, the first one is thumbs up, the second you can see is thumbs down, third is come here, fourth, okay, fifth is fingers crossed. When you cross your fingers like this, that means you are looking at a particular thing. One finger up conveys a meaning. Stop conveys a meaning as well. Time out also conveys a particular meaning. Clapping, quiet, pointing towards someone, which is very negative. When you start pointing at somebody, that is not good. You should not point at people. Handshake. So these are all the gestures of communication. Now, as you can see it on your screen here, these are certain postures of communication. Okay, so what does the first picture on your screen convey? Okay, that means the person who is listening here is slightly defensive. You can see that person has crossed legs. Now that crossed legs means that person is defensive. That means that person is trying to not accept what exactly is being told. Okay, but at the same time somewhat willing to pay attention, because he is having his hands near his chin. Okay, so that means he wants to be attentive but is also defensive kind of. In the second image you can see that is withdrawing and not willing to listen. That image, when you have folded arms, never sit in a classroom or never sit anywhere with folded arms. That shows that you are not willing to listen and you are withdrawing from the entire conversation. Third is the picture of a lady. Now her body is tense and not relaxed. She is very tensed, okay, and her head is stiff. Okay, it is very stiff, not a happy look, full of anxiety. She is not looking very happy, she is very anxious. The fourth picture, hand on your cheek, is full of boredom. We see a lot of people sitting like this at public places or even the classroom when we are teaching. So this is not good. This means that they are getting bored and you need to change the way in which you talk. Then the next picture is of thoughtful concentration. Next to that is when you are very attentive, and the last one is attentive and willing to ask a question. You are attentive but you wish to ask a question, so you are about to ask a question, and then this is your posture. So these are some of the examples of postures that are used. Okay, moving towards the last part of our topic, communication skills, that is characteristics of effective communication. Now, what are the characteristics? Let us move towards the concept of effective communication. What is it about? It is about delivering an information unambiguously so that receiver can decode it correctly. Never confuse people with what you say. There is this old saying in English that it is very difficult to be simple, but it is very simple to be difficult. Okay, so you'll have to be very simple in what you say. Don't try to confuse people by the use of your language. Be as precise, as clear, as simple as possible. That would create a definite impact in the minds of the listeners. Then, but what does it take to compose and deliver an effective message? What do you need to do? So, in Effective Public Relations, which was published in 1952, okay, Professor Scott M. Cutlip and Alan Center defined a set of principles known as the 7 C's of communication. How do you communicate effectively? So there are 7 C's of communication, very famous. Okay, you can see it on your screen here. Okay, this entire diagram is of the 7 characteristics of effective communication. Which is the first thing? That is completeness. Your message should be complete. Then conciseness. Okay, then it should be considerate enough. Then it should be correct enough. Then it should have proper clarity. Then it should be courteous enough. And the last one, it should be correct. So all these are the effective characteristics of communication. Let us look them one by one. Okay, let us first of all start with the concept of completeness. As you very well know, what do you mean by the word complete? That anything that you send should be completely understood by the person. Okay, that means the receiver gets all the information he or she needs to process the message and to take action. A complete message reduces the need for follow-up questions and smoothens the communication process. The clearer and the complete you are, the less the questions and more accurate you become. Second point is conciseness. Okay, that means keeping your message to the point. Okay, this is more about the content of your message rather than its length. Even a short memo, friends, can include irrelevant or redundant information. Never write or never speak something that is of no relevance to the topic that you are writing or speaking. Conciseness helps the receiver focus on what's important, speeds up the processing of information, and caters for improved understanding. Concise message always brings in better understanding. Third point is consideration. Okay, effective communication takes into account the receiver's background and the point of view. If your message hits a nerve or sounds as disrespectful, for example, the emotional reaction of the receiver might affect the perception of your message. Also, tailoring your message to your audience. Okay, to your particular audience. Now, what do you mean by your audience? That is by using argumentations and examples which are relevant to their experience. Makes it easier for them to process the content. Moving to the next point, that is the concreteness of communication. Any concrete message is specific, tangible, and vivid. It is further supported by facts, and figures for enhanced credibility. It helps your audience gain an overview of the broader picture of what you are going to present to them. Concreteness mitigates the risk of misunderstanding, fosters trust, and encourages constructive criticism. Next point is courtesy in your communication. Okay, friends, courtesy and consideration complement each other. Okay, courtesy, what does courtesy mean? It means respecting the receiver's cultures, cultural background, values, value system, and beliefs. That is, crafting or designing a message that is genuinely polite and unbiased. Next point is clarity. The clearer your message, the easier it gets for the receiver to decode it according to your original intent. Never be confusing in what you say. While this sounds obvious, most communication pitfalls originate from lack of clarity. Okay, start with a clear communication goal and accurate thought. Clear communication builds on exact terminology and concrete words to reduce ambiguities and confusion in the communication process. Next is correctness of your message. That means correct grammar and syntax when you are writing, along with its phonetic value and pronunciation, vouch for increased effectiveness and credibility of your message. Formal errors might affect the clarity of your message, trigger ambiguity, and raise doubts as well. They might also have a negative impact on the overall perception of the message, which could be seen as sloppy or negligent. You have to be correct, you have to be effective in terms of your use of grammar or syntax when you are writing, and in terms of your pronunciation when you are speaking. This image, my friends, is of effective communication. How does this happen? You see, the first point is it should be clear. That means the message should be clear. Second, it should be reliable. Third, it should be of a two-way channel. Fourth, the speed of transmission should be proper. It should neither be too hastily done or too lethargically done as well. Medium, the choice of medium should be proper. There should be mutual understanding between the speaker and the listener. Listener should have an open mind. This is very important. And if that listener has an open mind, you will get an effective feedback. Again, 7 C's of communication in a diagram. Be clear, be concise, be concrete, be correct, be coherent, be complete, and be courteous. This is how you look into the 7 C's of communication. Moving towards the barriers of communication. Now, friends, we discussed everything that can make communication wonderful. But there are certain problems around. Which are those problems? Those problems are identified by the name of barriers to effective communication. As you have it on your screen, there are a lot of barriers. You start with personal barriers, there are gender barriers, there are emotional barriers, language barriers, barriers related to your status, cultural barriers, organizational barriers, semantic barriers, inattention barriers, and physical barriers. We'll discuss every barrier individually. Okay. Now you can see this diagram here. Okay. First is the physical environmental barrier. Okay. Now that is caused by the problem of time or place or space or climate or noise or choice of the medium. Okay. Then there is a barrier which is caused by the wrong choice of medium. Then there is also a barrier which is related to the semantics, that is caused by how the meaning is connotated. Okay, so how the meaning is interpreted. There are cultural barriers which depends on the diversity of culture. For example, if you are speaking to a person from another culture altogether, that might prove to be a communication barrier. Then psychological or attitudinal barriers, that is caused by moods, your attitude, your relationships, and the barriers caused by varying perception of reality. That means your level of understanding and comprehension, which might be very different from the level of understanding or comprehension of some other person. Okay, now this is the first thing, that is the common personal barriers. Now, which are the points related to it? The first is selective attention. You don't, or you are not attentive towards everything. When you are attentive selectively, that becomes a problem because you have not listened to the entire thing. Then there is lack of knowledge, lack of vocabulary. You don't know the language that you have spoken with or you have spoken to, and lack of listening skills. You are not a good listener. These are certain common personal barriers. Gender barriers, that are relationship, respect at workplace, okay, educational background, okay, and all these things are very different most of the times with regard to men and women when they are pitted against or when they are with each other or are working together. Okay, overcoming barriers in gender communication isn't simple. It is very difficult, but can be made clear with a little patience and understanding. This barrier arises because men and women have different ways of thinking and communicating. Okay, men think very differently from women. So gender barrier is actually very inbuilt in the personality of yours if you are a man or if you are a woman. Then psychological or emotional barriers, that includes lack of attention. You are not attentive to certain things. That would be because of certain problems in your family or whatever. Premature evaluation, this is what is done most of the times. We don't listen to the entire topic or the entire concept. We evaluate prematurely and make our mind that this is what this person is trying to say. Actually, if you listen to that person completely or till the end, the meaning might be very different. Then poor retention, you are not able to remember what is said for a longer period of time. Loss of transmission, distrust, and emotions. Okay, if you are not trusting anybody, you will not listen to that person effectively. You will always listen to that person with a lot of apprehension, okay, or with a lot of doubt. Language barriers. Okay, now which are they? Different languages, for example, that means different vocabulary, different accents, different dialect. Okay, they represent regional barriers and national barriers. Semantic gaps, with words having similar pronunciation but more than one meaning. Okay, sometimes the pronunciation is the same but the meaning is different, so the context needs to be known. Then badly expressed message, wrong interpretation, and unqualified assumptions. If what you interpret is wrongly done, okay, communication falls flat. And the use of difficult or inappropriate words, poorly explained or misunderstood messages that can result to confusion. That could result into a lot of confusion. For example, if I am trying to say something to you and you understand it in a very different way, that would lead to a lot of confusion. These are socio-psychological barriers. The first is status consciousness. If I think that I am a very big person, or if I carry a lot of ego with me, communication does not happen that way. Being afraid of being snubbed publicly. See, with most of your students, what happens is they don't speak in the classroom, but as soon as they meet you in private, they would talk about their problem. That is because they are not confident enough and they believe that people would laugh at him or her and he would be snubbed publicly, and therefore it is not most of the times that your student speaks in the classroom if he or she is not confident enough. Then, not consulting subordinates, as the superiors feel that it would lower their dignity. Okay, sometimes subordinates are looked down upon. They have no value or they hold no value, and therefore there is a lot of social barrier there, and there is a lot of psychological barrier there as well. When you carry a lot of prejudice for other people, if you have made up your mind that this person who is going to speak is not good, that is a barrier. Now it might happen that that speaker actually puts forward a very valid point, but you will not be able to comprehend it just because you believe that that person is not good enough. That is your prejudice. Okay. Then, limited intellectual background. If I talk to you about a subject which you are not aware of at all, you understanding it becomes that much more complex. And lack of interest in the topic, if you are not interested in the topic itself, that is a huge barrier. This is cultural barrier. Okay, that means from which nation do you come, or which nation do you belong to. That adds to your diversity. That is a different tradition altogether. Your belief system is different. Your ethnicity is different. So this is a huge barrier, especially in this globalized world. When you are speaking to a lot of people across countries, this barrier is to be addressed very, very smoothly. And this is something that people are doing a lot of research into, and therefore the very concept of cross-cultural communication is very important nowadays. These are organizational barriers. That is, the first barrier is rules and regulations. Second, hierarchical relationships. Okay, in hierarchy, if you are the boss of any particular organization, that itself creates a barrier wherein your subordinates, if you are not of a good nature, would not come to you and talk to you. So that is a communication big breakdown. Okay, then non-conducting of regular meetings. If you don't meet people whom you work with regularly, that is a barrier as well. Wrong choice of channel, as we discussed the channel earlier in a very elaborative manner. Complexity of organizational structure is also a problem. Self-image. If you look down upon yourself, or if you think that you are too intelligent or too sharp or too intellectual or too good for others, that is also a barrier. And filtering of messages. That is unnecessary filtering. You might filter certain things and tell to others. That person would later on filter what he or she wishes to filter and pass on that message. That becomes an organizational barrier. These are the barriers of corporate communication. First is the attitude of the superiors. Okay, if they are too bossy, communication does not take place. Then, fear of challenging the authority. If you believe that if you try to question the authority, it would be a problem, then you never communicate at all. You stop communicating. Insistence of proper channel. You focus on the use of the channel rather than the message. That is also a barrier. Lack of confidence in subordinates. You hold no confidence at all in the people who work for you. Okay. Ignoring communication. You just don't listen to what is said because you are too busy in making up your mind on what you are going to speak in the future. Unwillingness to communicate is another barrier, and lack of proper incentive is also another barrier. See friends, if I am not willing to communicate at all with you, communication would not happen. So that is actually a barrier to communication. Or if I am ignoring what you are trying to say just because I am planning what I wish to say, is also a barrier to communication. These are semantic barriers, you see. That is barriers related to the language per se. That is words having different meanings. Faulty translations. Sometimes you translate Nowadays we do a lot of Google Translate, and when you read the Google translated page, it is completely different to what you mean in the basic language. Then unclarified assumptions, you assume things which are never said. Denotations and connotations, that is the meaning of what it is actually and the meaning that you understand from what is said. Technical jargons, use of bombastic words is not done. Okay, you should use them minimum unless and until it is absolutely inevitable. And bad expressions, how you express is also important. These are physical barriers. Okay, now what are physical barriers? That are with you, around you. If you are talking and somebody is whispering around, that hush voice is very disturbing and very annoying as well. If somebody is cheering all along without listening, that also becomes a barrier. Okay, if you are sitting in a classroom which is very near by the road and the cars are passing, that is a physical barrier. The noise of the car, noise of the factory, if you are around any particular factory, that is also a problem. A lot of noise, unwanted noise, that is, for example, the noise of a ceiling fan, if it is not working properly, is also a problem. Okay, message overload. If I convey a lot of things in a very short span of time, that is a barrier as well. Poor acoustics is also a barrier. Uncomfortable environment. Friends, if I am not comfortable at the place from where I am communicating, that would prove to be a huge physical barrier. Okay, uncomfortable sitting. If I am sitting on a chair which is not comfortable at all, that would show on my face, and later on it would show in my way of conversation and in my posture, entire posture. Then defective mechanical devices. Okay, the use of mic, for example, if the mic is not working properly, or if there is a certain problem with the use of computers, if you are not good at. Nowadays we are using a lot of online modes of teaching. So if I am not good at the use of platforms that are Google Meet or Microsoft Team or Zoom or whatever, or Cisco WebEx, or if I am not aware of how to use it, that is also a barrier. And frequent interruptions. If you are interrupted, if for example I am speaking right now, okay, if somebody regularly comes in at every 5-10 minutes in front of me asking me questions, that would be a physical barrier to communication. Now, here friends are levels of miscommunication. Basically it happens at two levels, because communication is also at two levels. One is at the sender's level, another is at the receiver's level. Now, at the sender's level, it is formulation or organization of thoughts or idea in a message. So that is where you might falter. Then you might falter in encoding of a message. You might falter in receiving the message as well. And at the receiver's level, decoding is a problem. Okay, if the message is not conveyed properly, you will not be able to decode that message properly, and your interpretation in terms of the language that you know or the language that you use, okay, or the cultural background you are from, the semantic barriers that you might have. At the transmission level, where noise occurs, level of miscommunication first at senders, then at receivers, then at transmission level, that is the problem of noise. And at the reaction or feedback level, that is the necessary condition for the completion of the entire process. Okay, at the feedback level, there is also this problem of miscommunication. Okay, because if you have not understood something properly, you would be giving it back in a very different manner to people, because your understanding has had a lot of problems. Now, these are general barriers of communication, barriers in general. Okay, the first is muddled messages. That means messages that are very confusing. Second is stereotyping. If you keep on repeating the same thing again and again, it becomes very boring. It becomes stereotypical. The way in which you speak becomes stereotypical as well. Or wrong channel. If you have not chosen the correct channel, that is a problem as well. Lack of understanding of language, that means if the language is not common, that is a problem. Lack of feedback is a problem. Poor listening skills is a problem. Interruptions are a problem, and physical distractions are a problem, as we discussed earlier as well. So, friends, this is the last lap of our topic. That is, we have discussed barriers. Now, let us know how to overcome those barriers. As you can see it on your screen, the first thing is be clear and be complete. Second, use proper language. Third, sound structure of communication has to be very good. Fourth, orientation of learners or employees needs to be done. Before taking up any session, they should be oriented about the topic in general. Then, empathetic listening is very important. Avoiding premature evaluation, which was a barrier earlier on. Motivation and mutual confidence is very important. Consistent behavior is very important as well. Occasional use of grapevine, that means you should not be focusing on using the bottom up way of communication or top down way of communication. Sometimes grapevine works as well, and feedback becomes important. Then your gesture and tone should be proper and in line with the topic. Respecting differences in perception. Once you start respecting others and their perception, communication becomes good or wonderfully managed. Then, removing incorrect filtering, knowing people we communicate with. That is why orientation is important. Okay, choosing the right medium and channel. Attentive listening, this most of the time lacks. And appropriate use of language. Never use language out of contexts. So, friends, at the end, it can be said that communication is efficient and purposeful when the chosen recipient receives exactly what the sender wishes to send, and it is furthermore effective when the receiver does what the sender of the message actually intended understands. Okay, so to ensure effective communication, it is important to follow basic etiquettes of the mentioned points that we discussed earlier in our session, and make the experience of communication absolutely seamless. Friends, thank you for being very patient and listening to this topic. Thank you. And I hope this session helps you in understanding the very concept of communication skills in a better way. Thank you.